Hey, happy Friday. We are back and I'm really excited because I'm here with Stacey Sparks from North Shore Family Services and we're going to talk today about children, adult children and their parents and the interpersonal relationship that they have where sometimes they are just not available to help parents. So welcome Stacey. Thank you for being with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Betsy, for having me.
So, Stacey, tell me, unfortunately, we come across parents often who will say to us, well, I don't have anybody to help. My kids are out of town. I don't have the greatest relationship with them. So, tell us what's going on here, maybe.
Well, I know, my expertise is, mental health. My expertise is going to be all about the emotion behind it, or the, dysfunction, or, the issues that I find on an emotional or psychological level. And for me, what I found, I started researching when I spoke with you the first time. And what I found was that there are a lot of people talking about um, parents being not emotionally available for their children, so that the Gen Xers now, who need to be taking care of the elderly parents, are not interested, or they don't want to, frankly. um, I found in a lot of people talking about not wanting to give back because they felt neglected in their childhood. So, yeah.
That's a very, very interesting fact. And I know if you talk to much older people, they'll say, well, my grandmother lived with me, my grandfather lived with me,
Yeah.
we took care of our elderly aunt.
Yeah.
So are you talking to the Gen Xers, or do you see it from the senior population that they're unhappy, or where are you seeing it specifically?
Definitely not the senior population. The research and exploration that I did to talk to you today was all within sort of the Gen X population. So my findings were really within the generation that were your latchkey kids. My generation, I'm 52, and we had our grandparents, or we had other caregivers. I think we had, especially moms,
Mm-hmm.
in the workforce for the first time.
Right.
And we really kind of we didn't, not all of us, I didn't raise myself. I had my grandparents. My mom worked full time.
Right.
But I am part of that generation that kind of came home to make your own snacks, do your own TV watching, and sometimes raise your own siblings. So, it just is part of what translates into um, psychologically for people feeling emotionally neglected. And the older generation that raised Gen Xers were very much the push through it. Emotions are weaknesses, that we don't need to talk about things. Let's just do what we need to do to get
Right.
ourselves where we need to be.
Right.
And so a lot of the emotions were ignored. And I think now that these elderly, the senior parents need their Gen Xer kids to step up, I think there's a lot of resistance. I think there's a lot of resistance in my generation because of our parents not being emotionally present. And that's not blaming, and that's not saying, that the elderly, the generation before us, did anything wrong. It's just that they were busy, they were working, I think women were in the workforce for the first time. I mean,
Yes.
generally, not for the
Yes,
first time, but
I'm a generation older than you, and I would say, yeah, um, they weren't as, even though my generation thought we were groundbreaking women's libbers, as we called ourselves in the 60s.
I think you
We,
were. Absolutely.
but we really weren't. Okay. We were the beginning. We were the beginning, but it was your the next generation whose parents, my mom worked for a little while till my dad said, this is getting in the way, and she quit.
Right.
Okay. So,
right. I think you make a really good point, because and my point is, we are each of the generations standing on the backs of the generations before us.
Right.
So you were the groundbreakers, right? And so we're just continuing, our generation, the millennials, the Gen Zers, and everyone coming up in the ranks behind us are all creating our place in the workforce based on what our parents and grandparents provided for us. I think that what got lost in my generation, Gen X, was the emotional support and emotional focus that we needed from our parents. We know now kids need involvement, and that's also another, not too much involvement, right? But enough involvement, right? Because if we're overly involved, our kids don't do well. And if we're under involved, our kids don't do well. So there's this beautiful balance that we know now that children need, right? And so I think that we are cleaning up a lot of the lack of emotional awareness and intelligence that my generation, my kids, and so on and so forth, are just realizing that we need to learn more about, right? We're just realizing that we need to increase our emotional intelligence and our emotional communication skills, everything that's involved in being able to be in touch with that part of ourselves, right? Because it is a very emotional thing to ask a kid, an adult child, to come right off of they get into empty nesting, or they just get finished raising their own kids, and then they're expected to take care of their parents. And I think generations before us just did it because that's the way we did things. But as we've grown more emotionally intelligent and aware, we figured out I was lacking, and now I'm upset with you, and I have things that I need to work through, and you want me to come take care of you.
Yeah. And I think that I would say my mother's generation, and she would be 90 something if she were alive today, 94, she would be turning 94 this year. She resented her parents because but she took care of them.
Exactly.
Okay. So that was the thing, right? So she resented a lot of things, but she did take care of them.
Right.
I do have people now, I have heard often, well, I don't know what they're going to do. That's their problem.
Right.
So we see a lot of that going on. And that's a big reason why those of us in the senior care community are trying to empower these seniors and give them the help they need, because they do not have it from their children.
Exactly.
And even some of them, and I don't want to put fault anywhere or blame anywhere, but often the children don't have the resources. They don't live nearby. There's a lot of other circumstances that can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think our current economy and the way that things are going in that, there are so many different social impacts on why people our age are not stepping up. Again, my expertise is in mental health. My expertise is in sort of the psychological side of everything that contributes to, or what I think at least contributes to, that lack of responsibility or lack of willingness to to step up for your parents. I do think that what you mentioned is super important in terms of um, the fact that what I said earlier about the push through it generations,
Yeah.
you do what you need to do, you get her done.
Yeah.
And I think as we become more emotionally self-aware and more psychologically, our psychological prowess has, grown and evolved. I
Right.
think that evolution has opened people up to the fact that before, like my mom took care of her parents and I helped with that as well.
Right.
I moved home to take care of my grandma who had Alzheimer's
Wow.
because my mom was working full time, and I was a young mom. I was in my 30s, early 30s, and I was caring full time for my grandmother who had Alzheimer's. So I made it for about 9 months and I couldn't do it anymore because I had 3 children, small children. And so
Wow.
I am very familiar with the responsibility to those elderly parental figures or parents, themselves.
Right.
Um,
And
I'm also, yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that is not happening today.
I
Whether
don't,
it's because you're mad or
yeah,
or it just isn't done.
right.
People would say, well, I have to live my life, so you need to figure it out, which comes to my song and dance that people need to prepare for this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, things have changed and, we have evolved. Our brains, our minds, bodies, and spirits are evolving,
Exactly.
and emerging holistically as we age. And I think that, a huge contributing factor to the idea of this is my responsibility and I live to take care of the people older than me. I think that's past.
Right.
And I think, part of it is the emotional hurt, the emotional trauma that has occurred to people who were emotionally neglected. And that contribution causes the anger and the sadness and the uh, just kind of setting boundaries, right? Because anyone who does any work in the therapeutic process realizes that those are all things that we need to be doing when we've been, mistreated and harmed, and childhood emotional neglect is harmful. So it is absolutely understandable that people are resentful and that people are, not willing to allow those boundaries to be crossed.
Right.
And I do think that evolution is extraordinary, but at the same time, that evolution does put itself directly against the cultural standpoint of I owe this to my parents. I
Well,
think that if parents want to be taken care of, they have to make sure that they have very solid, very healthy, very good relationships with their kids.
except I would like to go one step further to say that culturally now it is perfectly acceptable to say, I am not doing that.
That's right.
So even if the parent and child have a very close relationship, and I'll just talk about my mom and sister who were inseparable.
Sure.
And same personality, live near each, my mother moved in with my sister, and that lasted about 3 weeks. And that was they're just the boundaries in our culture and the way we think today. And the American family, David Brooks just wrote a wonderful article about the American family, that the American family has changed over the last 100 years, obviously. And so this is not this is just, nobody can take it. Where when my dad grew up, he had aunts, uncles, everybody was in the same apartment building and everybody chipped in. That is not our culture anymore. So
Yeah, not as much as it used to be.
yeah.
And I do think it is impacted by people's awareness and willingness to do the self-care that they need in order to nurture that emotional, psychological side of themselves and to be well. Those boundaries are necessary for emotional wellness for a lot of folks. And as you said, when your sister had your mom move in, there were boundaries that needed to be respected, and they needed to figure out a different option.
A different option.
And I just think that people, where we didn't really take responsibility for what would happen to us when we got old enough to need something to happen differently than living on our own, right? We didn't used to plan for that. And I think now we have to.
Right. And that is exactly it. We didn't plan for it. We didn't grow up realizing that we needed to plan for it because number one, nobody wants to think about it. Number two, we weren't raised really seeing it because quite frankly, people died. The people didn't live as long in 1958
Absolutely.
as they do today.
Absolutely.
And
there's so many contributing factors.
There's so many contributing factors. And I think the best way moving forward for everyone's mental health, the parents and the children, is to seek outside help. Agreed. There are many, many services out there from therapists and senior coordinators and people to help you with your home and all your possessions, because this is the world we live in, and we need to get the message out there.
It is. I agree with you, Betsy. And I think the resources are there. I think that any social worker or, psychologist, anyone in the mental health related field, we're here to help out and to find those resources. So, but those resources exist, and there are a lot of people who are devoting their lives to elder care.
Right.
And it's just about knowing what your options are and making a plan.
Absolutely. Making a plan is the main, and it's, I said we plan for our kids' college education when the minute we conceive, and then we don't even think about what happens to us when we're 90. So we need to change our mindset a little bit about that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think that, parallel to planning for college is a really interesting one. That's an interesting way to kind of show people, giving them like a very good foundation. You plan for kids to go to college. What about planning for your future, right? We go to college to ensure a future. Your future is going to include getting to, God willing, right? I don't know.
Right. And I think that we used to use the word retirement. People go, I'm not going to retire. Well, it's not really retirement. It's aging. So it's the same thing. You don't really have to go to college, but you're going to need a nest egg to get started in whatever you're doing. So what are you thinking about?
Exactly. Yeah. It's just about making a plan.
Yes. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for this today. You have been fabulous. If people need, so mental health is near and dear to my heart. Please, you can reach out to North Shore Family Services. Stacey or any other professionals can help you depending on your needs. So I thank you again for taking the time and for being with me today.
You too, Betsy. I'm so happy to talk to you. You're so easy to talk to. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful week, everyone.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.